So I didn't get to do one of these last week. I had a lot of stuff going on and work related stuff, and I was going to jump into the Armory papers again, which has a wellspring of material for stuff to work with and comment off of. But then I got this comment from a subscriber, and I thought I would actually talk about that instead rather than wait until the end of the video to read the subscriber comment. I think I would start at the beginning of it because this is actually something that it's something that I knew on some level, but the way they phrased it made a lot of sense to me, and I think it's almost something important enough to talk about. And it's they said 3 days ago, relapse is a term that AA needed to push the disease model. And so it makes sense that it was manipulated into the ideology when I think about it. I mean, without the idea of relapse, the disease model loses its credibility. For this relapse is very important for the propaganda to survive. I've come to see this as something that kept me entangled and eventually indoctrinated. It was my disease telling me I didn't have a disease, so any thought that I had that went against the AA consensus was dismissed as my disease talking to me. Very creepy tactic used to gaslight people into their self-identity and making them ideologues of their doctrine. I've been sifting through my extensive involvement, and I think this particular dynamic can be very well one of the most insidiously destructive elements of that cult. Because if they hadn't planted that idea or seed, that, as they would call it in my head when I left AA and drank, I may have been able to actually believe, and I would add here a caveat, understand, that all I did was drink and I could simply just make an adjustment or grow out of it. But with the idea of relapse embedded in my psyche, I came to doubt my own self-sufficiency because it was implanted in my head that alcoholism is a spiritual malady and AA had the only answer. Crazy when I look back. And it got me to thinking about the one thing that happened to me a lot of the times, and during my years of coming and going in AA, even after I knew it was bullshit, there was nothing worse than picking up a drink and ending up on a bender. There was nothing worse than waking up in the morning, with the shakes and pouring sweat, the anxiety through the roof, the the not being able to properly function without grabbing a bottle out from underneath the bed and having to take several swallows of it in order to get to get inebriated enough that I could actually function as a normal human being. There was nothing worse than being stuck in that. And there was nothing worse than to slip and drink here and there, slip and drink here and there, and then eventually it all culminate into just this terrifying, horrible, this terrifying, horrible relapse. And I knew AA was bullshit for a long time. I'm going to say for the last 4 or 5 years that I kept going in and out with it. But a relapse itself, or a bender, or whatever you'd like to call it, would somehow reinforce this idea that self-sufficiency, that the ability to be self-sufficient, was not going to be sufficient enough for me to overcome my drinking problem, which is really interesting because once I got away from AA altogether, I have not had any more problems. But it was that idea that relapse was this god awful, horrible thing that by slipping up and taking a drink of alcohol, that I had committed some kind of horrifying crime, when it would culminate into a terrible path of self-destruction and all the other bad things that comes from heavy drinking. I don't miss drinking at all. As far as root causes, I gave up really trying to find those, figure out what those were. Because to me, I just came to a conclusion that I can't drink alcohol. And it wasn't some major experience. It wasn't some magical thing that happened to me. It was just it was just finally rammed home to me, to myself. You know what? I can't drink alcohol. I always end up getting on one of these drunken benders, and when I get drunk, I can't wake up the following morning and shake it off and just keep going. I'm one of those people. When I wake up the following morning, I have to drink enough just to stop the pain, to be able to function. But it would ram home and it would reinforce this idea. It would reinforce this belief that self-sufficiency, that my own willpower, that my own power was severely damaged and flawed in some way, because why would I keep making these destructive choices if there wasn't something wrong with me, something bad wrong with me that needed to be fixed from an external power or an external source or something like that. I didn't believe in the religious bullshit that AA was preaching to me, obviously, any longer, but I knew I needed something somewhere. And it never occurred to me until a long time later that that was the major issue that was actually feeding the vicious cycle of being stuck in that. Was the belief that I couldn't do anything about the drinking problem all by myself. It never occurred to me that it was up to me to do something about the drinking problem all along, But there was this part of me that literally lived in terror of, okay, I've made some dry periods here and there. I've gone 30 days here. I've gone 6 months there. I've gone however long I've gone without, ending up on a bender or ending up all fucked up or something. But but inevitably I would always return to it, and never failing to look at all the reasons why I was returning to it. But I had come to this idea that I keep returning to booze even when I dry out and feel better. So therefore, I'm hopelessly damaged beyond all repair, and I have to do something or find something externally that will take that away from me. Otherwise, I'm never going to get out from underneath it. But I did get out from underneath it. I was able to finally just put it away for good. I can't sit here and say that for the rest of my life from this day forward that I'll never touch another drop of alcohol again, but I can honestly say that, the way the cards are all lined up right now, because I've been through things, devastating things, all kinds of terrible things since leaving AA, and it's not about the I haven't found it necessary to pick up a drink kind of attitude either. I didn't think about drinking. I didn't really think about drinking any longer because it was just not, it was not central to my existence to catch a buzz any longer. I just don't really see anything attractive or anything that really, how could I put it, that really tempts me about trying to catch a buzz and risking a hangover and risking, this coming out of these drunken benders. And I just don't see any reason to play the game of trying to say, well, maybe I could drink a little, maybe not a little. It's just something that's become a non-issue for me. And it's there, from time to time. I'm not going to say there's not been a day that it doesn't cross my mind once in a great while where I say, a drink would be good right now, but it doesn't have that all-encompassing power it used to have. Like when I was in AA and I would get a thought like, maybe today would be a good day for a drink. The first thought that would run through my mind would be this abject terror of, oh my God, I'm going to end up on another bender again and very soon, and I don't know what external thing I can find to solve the problem for me. When there was never nothing there to begin with, it was all my own willpower all along. But I do believe that AA pushes that, because when you come out of a bad relapse, when you come out of a really bad drunken bender, or if it's a narcotic problem or a drug problem or whatever it is, when you slip up and fuck up, and you reap really negative benefits and negative consequences, then there is that part of you that's going to say, well, my self-sufficiency has failed me, because there are very real terrible consequences to drinking alcohol or doing drugs or whatever. Yeah, I could have killed somebody driving drunk. I could have gotten cirrhosis. I did get alcoholic neuropathy, which luckily has gone almost completely away. At least in my case, it has. But it would always shakes people up to their core when something like that happens. I made the decision to do this, and now, something really fucking horrible is taking place, and I don't know how I'm going to come back from this without something somewhere that's going to fix this problem for me. It occurred to me, like what the commenter was saying, if you did slip up and take a drink, it doesn't have to turn into a bender. You had a drink. But AA turns relapse into a crime. AA turns relapse into a sin. AA turns relapse into something that's really unforgivable. There's a huge moral stigma to picking up a drink. One of the most interesting things that I think I can think about with that is the fact that you have old timers in there who steal from people, who deal narcotics, who prey on newcomers, both sexually and financially. They take advantage of people, and no AA member even bats an eye about it. They just say, something like, well, we're all sick in here. We're all sick in here. But the primary purpose of the whole entire stupid fucking cult religion is supposed to be about helping the alcoholic who still suffers. But if you are an alcoholic in AA, well, there is no such thing as an alcoholic. Let's redefine the term there. If you are struggling with a drinking problem in AA doesn't seem to want to reach out a hand and help you when you're doing it. All it wants to do is browbeat you and tell you what a horrible person you are. If you look at the entire steps, the steps are all about, they'll tell you it's not your fault that you've got this so-called disease. They'll tell you it's not your fault that you're an alcoholic, that you have a disease and you can't treat people who are sick, like this. You can't be hard on yourself because you're sick. But then they turn around and it becomes very obvious very fast that everything in life is your fault. Okay, everything, the minute you launch into those steps, all 12 of them are designed to break you. Your first 3 is telling you, yep, your self-sufficiency has failed you. Yeah, your decision-making process has failed you. Your ability to trust your own intuition has failed you. All those things you're already afraid of when you develop a drinking problem. You're already afraid. What if my intuition has failed me? What if my ability to decide for myself and have choices in life, what if all those things have failed me so badly that I can never make another rational choice again? And AA is telling you, yeah, it's really true. All those things have failed you. You can't make a rational choice again. You can't do anything ever again. The rest of the steps is just confession and guilt-inducing shame, telling you that everything you've ever done in life has always been your fault, that you're an immoral, disgusting, selfish creature, driven by all these disgusting instincts, which are very natural and normal. They tell you that normal human emotions like anger and rage and frustration and things like that, which are part of the human experience because we are emotional creatures as human beings, they tell you all those are crimes and they're not for you any longer. You can't deal with those. You got to let those go because they're just bad for you because you're just a disgusting alcoholic, even though it's not your fault you were born that way. They'll actually tell you that in spite of the little thing in how it works about it's not their fault, they seem to have been born that way. They treat everybody who seems to have been born that way as though it is all their fault. One of the interesting things about that is they'll tell you self-sufficiency is bad, but then they'll turn around and tell you sobriety is your responsibility. Well, if self-sufficiency is bad, how can I have responsibility, for it? Or they'll tell you you're completely powerless over alcohol and it's not your fault, but if you drink again, or if you pick up a drink again, then they'll tell you, yeah, that's all your fault because you chose to drink. You chose to pick up the booze. But I thought I was powerless over alcohol and had lost the power of choice. It's another thing that I've come to the conclusion that AA members don't believe it's a disease. The controlling AA narcissistic guru assholes that practically run all those meetings as a playground for all their victims, they don't believe that if you're drinking again because of whatever triggers it may be going on in your life, which AA never addresses, they don't believe that you're drinking because of that. They secretly believe you're drinking because you chose to drink, and now they have the license to beat on you and torture you and talk terrible about you and character assassinate you and take great pleasure if you drink yourself to death and die, But I do believe that, yeah, the comment here actually touches on a very important point, that relapse is what they need to push their cult religion all the way through and through, because if relapse is truly a product of self-sufficiency failing you, if relapse is truly used as evidence against you that your self-will is just terrible, that your intuition is all fucked up, then yeah, it makes you more susceptible to fall for them because you're going to come out of a drunken bender, you're going to slip and drink even though you know it's not in your best interest to drink. And you're going to say, oh my God, why did I make that mistake? And they turned it into such a capital crime in order, if you make that mistake, that they put such a burden on you, such an ugly stigma on you for that you fall for it. You fall for the bullshit. If let's say you make a poor judgment in a situation. Let's take drinking out of the equation for a minute. Everybody in this world at one point or the other, and myself included, only I've done it hundreds of times, and I bet everybody else has made a decision in a situation, and the situation ended up being you made the wrong decision. The situation blew up. The situation completely, totally fucked up. And there's a part of you that does feel inept inside when that happens. You feel like you're a failure as a human being. You feel like you've done the wrong thing simply because you made a simple miscalculation, even if it's a serious miscalculation. If you woke up in the morning and you saw your radiator was empty and you filled it up full of antifreeze and you saw it was slightly leaking and you said to yourself, well, my insurance company really doesn't pay for tows and it's only leaking really small, small amounts. I think I'm going to put my emergency flashes on and I think I'm going to try to go to my mechanic. I don't have very far to drive. Maybe I'll put another bottle of antifreeze with me in the car in case it starts smoking, and I'm gonna try to do it this way. This is just what I'm gonna do. There may be a lot of nagging voices inside of your brain, and it's saying, hey, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. Maybe you should just pay for the tow. Even though it's gonna hurt you financially, just pay for the fucking tow to the mechanic place. And you're thinking, no, I really do believe it'll be okay. You get out there on the road and you're driving, and all of a sudden smoke starts pouring out of the trunk of the car. And as you're by the side of the road, you later have to call the tow truck. It gets towed, it gets to the drop off place, and lo and behold, the mechanic tells you, well, you know what? If you hadn't tried to drive the car here when it was leaking, you wouldn't be in the situation you're in now because you have now blown a head gasket. And because you have blown a head gasket, you probably are going to need to talk to your bank about getting a loan and getting another car because the car is utterly fucked as of now. There would be a part of you that would say, why did I make that stupid decision? Why did I make that poor judgment? Why didn't I think about this? Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? I wished I had it to do over again. And I wouldn't have made this stupid decision. But it doesn't denote that you're a failure as a human being, that your self-sufficiency is gone, that your belief in your own intuition is gone, that you can't trust yourself ever again. It's a simple mistake. Well, the drinking addiction thing is much like that. It may be a bad judgment call to take a drink when it's not in your best interest to. It may be a bad judgment call to pick up alcohol when you know that based on past experiences, it's not going to be favorable. Those are bad judgments, but they're not an utter condemnation of you as a human being. They're just poor decisions that you made based on an addiction that you have that AA does nothing to address the root causes of. AA just blames it all on sin and character defects and other stupid shit that has absolutely nothing to do with addiction. But it shakes your faith in yourself whenever you do that. Whenever you end up in a bad predicament and it's because of a poor decision you have made, you're going to be hard on yourself. You're going to feel like you're not really worth it as a human being. You're going to feel like a failure and a loser and all those other kind of things. Your own voices are already telling you that. And AA comes into the play and it tells you, well, you know what? All those little nagging voices in your head, all those little things that are bothering you about yourself, those are all true. You are a failure as a human being. You are a bad person. You are a stupid person. You're not worth anything. But you could be with us. Now you got to be perfect from now on. Now that you've joined us, you got to be perfect. You can never fuck up or relapse or fail or anything else ever again. But it's not really your fault you're in this predicament. But it is your fault. I remember reading a thing about. I almost went into something that's going on in the public sphere right now, and I'd really rather not get into that. But I read a thing one time about, and it kind of ties into what I'm talking about here. The reason a lot of crimes against people there's a lot of crimes that happen against people go unreported. Sadly enough, sexual crimes is literally at the top of the list. Rape victims oftentimes don't report them. Sometimes when rape victims do report those crimes, those those garbage perpetrators, those garbage human beings who committed such a vile act, they don't actually ever even get prosecuted to the full extent of the law or things like that. It makes certain victims want to stay, not emboldened to come forward, especially when you have people in society that are more than happy to pass judgment like AA members do to drinkers and say, well, you were fucking asking for it. Well, you're a fucking whore anyway. You probably, and all of that other stuff. You see, part of the problem, I think, in a situation like that is when someone is attacked and is victimized, it sets off that thing that exists inside of all of our heads. Could I have done something different? Maybe I shouldn't have said this. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I shouldn't have done this. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. When the truth of the matter is, a rape victim has no responsibility for the rape. The rape is 100% the fault of the piece of shit who would do something like that to another human being. But that little voice that exists in our heads is called our consciousness, which sometimes is really a curse, in my opinion, that makes you inclined to blame yourself for the bad things that happens to you. AA comes along and capitalizes on that. They say to you, yeah, it is your fault. You were drinking when you got raped, so therefore it's all your fault. You're processing trauma, and you're being told that the voices in your head that make you feel like you're to blame for that, they're right. I was reading a book not too long ago about a guy who was raised by a really controversial figure, a real piece of shit. He was a white supremacist leader, and his son wrote a book about him after his death. He had never had too much contact with him in his later years. He was a garbage human being. But one of the central themes in the book, I think, that I noticed was that he said, my father beat me up every day when I was a kid. Beat me up every single fucking day. Taught me all that racial ideology stuff and all those kinds of things. But he said, what was funny? I knew he was a garbage human being. I knew he was a terrible person, but yet there was some part of me that always felt like I was to blame for his cruelty and his abuse. And there was always some part of me that was actually trying to seek his approval. He said, even though I knew I was never going to get any approval from him, even though I knew he never even came to my wedding when I finally got married. But there was a part of me that actually still wanted to have my father's love. And I think that there's an underlying element here that I actually didn't intend to explore when I started doing this video. But there's an underlying element here when we make poor decisions in our lives, or when we are victims, or when terrible things happen as a result of whatever. There is that tendency, I think, unless you're a psychopath, like some of those AA old-timers who don't ever believe anything is their fault, who the world is a victim playground for. I think there is this tendency to believe that we're somehow to blame for things that happen to us that are bad. And I think AA capitalizes on that. I think it tells you, yeah, you're to blame for all of it. And you need us and you need God in order to fix you, because nothing else is even going to tolerate, touch you, or accept you. So I think it's very interesting that comment led me down to this deep rabbit hole of a discussion here that I didn't intend to go on. But, making bad decisions because you have an addiction to alcohol is literally just that. You made bad decisions because you had an addiction to alcohol. It doesn't mean that you're diseased. It doesn't mean that you're hopeless. It doesn't mean that you can never trust your own intuition again. I guess that's about all I can say for this particular video. I had no idea where I was going to go with this. When I got started, I was originally going to talk about, I had no idea, no pre-plan where it was going to go, but it went down this particular deep rabbit hole for this time around. Chime in the comments. Let me know if you if you have a tendency to blame yourself for things that aren't even your fault. I think that's a very normal human thing to do. I don't think it's peculiar to alcoholics like the stupid fucking AA cult religion preaches. And I guess I'll see you guys next week.